is the deepest, wide is the widest, or how Colorado became a story again in this season, quarterback changes and why you might not know the full story, and USC lets one get away and is Michigan back. This is the College GameDay Podcast for Monday, September 23rd. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and Ryan McGee. Let's start with the finish of the night, if not the game of the night on Saturday, Baylor and Colorado. In the 4-box on glorious YouTube TV, and before long, I zoomed in and clicked on Baylor, Colorado, and just watched that. Great theater, shanked field goal. There was a stretch where Shedeur Sanders got sacked 4 times in 5 plays. And then the theater of the absurd unfolded when, way before they tied the game, on a drop pass. I think that was Will Shepherd, who, had a sensational night. And then he dropped the pass in the clutch. Caden Jenkins fell down, the defensive back for Baylor. And then on the Hail Mary, he fell down again. And there were so many defensive errors by Baylor that allowed that to happen, and a great play. Pete, when did you see it? Because you were coming back from BC. When did you see the Hail Mary?
I watched it in the back of an Uber, and it was pretty.
You're such a romantic. You, Kate Thamel, Baylor, Colorado, back of an Uber. I'm glad romance isn't dead.
Not
like a Nora Ephron movie.
Not a linear trip from Chestnut Hill to South Boston. So there was plenty of time in the back of an Uber. How do we ever live without like YouTube TV on our phones for moments like that? I mean, I felt like I watched it like it was no different than sitting in my living room watching it. So one of the great details of that, Rece, I read yesterday was that Baylor's defensive formation in that situation, Aranda said they call it Victory Cigar.
Oh. And somebody put one of those exploding pellets in the middle of it and it blew right up in their face.
Yes.
But, the thing is, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know everybody's assignment in Victory Cigar formation for Baylor. But they had 2 safeties about 5 yards deep in the end zone. One might argue, you kind of get your heels to the line back there because there were a couple guys back there at the end not really doing much. Caden Jenkins, he fell down again. But the other thing that happened was they rushed 5, and which is fine because, you look at the Gravedigger play that Alabama hit Auburn with and they rushed 2 and they didn't. So I get that. But you send the slot corner and he runs right into the pile. And instead of making sure he was coming from the side, the left that Shedeur scrambled to, so you've got no contain. Mm-hmm. And now Shedeur still had to get rid of it right before he got hit. But instead of keeping him boxed up back there, now you take a defender away who just ran right into the middle of the pile and didn't get home, didn't apply any pressure, didn't do anything. And so now you cut down the numbers, and then you have a guy slip in the secondary, and now you're going to overtime. It was the theater of the absurd and some really poor execution at the end by Baylor and good execution by Colorado to pull it off for sure.
Well, and I think that's the part of this that gets lost is Baylor deserves every bit of criticism, but because it's Colorado, the national reaction fascinates me because people are either so excited or they're like, oh, now we got to talk about Colorado again. but if you listen to Travis Hunter and he talks about the design of the play and you watch what they did offensively, it was a good play. And it's not their fault that Baylor did what they did, but Travis Hunter talks about, Shedeur talks about, putting Travis Hunter in the boundary. All right, now he's drawing attention in the opposite direction because I'm rolling this way. And the 2 and 3 guys in the trip set, and they cross about midway toward the end zone and draw those defenders. And now Webster's one-on-one. Now Webster makes a catch of his life. But there was a plan. But because it's Colorado, it fascinates me, Pete, because people are just like, oh, they're just making it up. There was a design. But, Baylor absolutely helped the process. But now here's the situation. Because, I went out to Colorado week 1, and they were very open about, we want to make a bowl game, right? And we're in that window now at the end of September where, there they sit at 3-1. And I look at their schedule now, and a schedule that felt a lot more daunting at the start of the season. Like their next last game of the year is Kansas. Well, that game right there probably will determine whether or not they go to a bowl game. And man, you look at those Big 12 bowl games, and you think about what if the Texas Bowl, or probably too high, but the Alamo Bowl, the First Responder Bowl, any of these bowl games sitting in the state of Texas, how over the moon would they be to get Deion Sanders back in the building in the state? So now and then
Shedeur and Travis wouldn't play, but
whatever. But Deion would be there, and so I just that part of it fascinates me. But I watched the game in my hotel room in Columbia because I made it to Columbia for Parents Weekend. And
nice.
Same thing. South Carolina's 3-1, and now they're looking at the schedule. All right, so I like the end of September because now we're trying to figure out teams that we probably thought weren't going to make bowl games. Now they have a chance. But Colorado, any bowl game would take that. Can you imagine Deion Sanders at the Pop-Tart Bowl? I mean, they'll break the internet.
That would be Pete. I will say that this. Maybe you have some intel that I don't have. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure Shedeur and Travis wouldn't play.
Yeah, that was an assumption. I just think at that point, there's some big financial realities that would have to come in. So that was a prediction, not a reported thing. I want to be clear about that.
And I'm just saying, I think there might be a little bit of a different circumstance given their Shedeur's obviously, and Travis, as close as can be, it seems, from the outside to Deion without being actual, blood relative in terms of family.
But how many sacks did Shedeur take Saturday? Was it 7?
7? Yeah. Well, he took 4 and 5 plays.
Yeah. That's going to take its toll at some point here, right? I mean, he took some shots too. Like he took some clean shots, unblocked stuff, like free runners. Like
I'll say this too about Travis Hunter. In addition to the offensive prowess, and then he makes the hit on the goal line in overtime that costs the fumble and you go through the end zone, ultimately win the game. He's the best player in college football, and there are 2 more months of the season to play, and you have to continue to perform if you're going to win the Heisman Trophy. The way he plays, to me at this point, there's not really much doubt. If I had to, try not to talk Heisman too early because so many things can change. But at this point, who's a better football player than he is? There's not one, not in the country, not anybody who does the same things that he does, the multitude of things that he does. He's the best player. He's the most outstanding player. Yeah. Now, it is fair for Heisman voters. I get tired of people ragging on Heisman voters and there are some absurd things, and also, ragging on pollsters because you don't agree with me, therefore you must be dumb, which is, it's a plague on our entire society in all walks of life, but particularly in sports. But to me, most outstanding, he's it. If someone is voting and says, okay, I hear you, great player, most talented, but to me, most outstanding means you also have to win at a high level, and it will be somewhat dependent on how many games Colorado wins. I don't think that's completely unfair, but for me, here as we sit here on September 23rd, if they said, hey, we're going to take your Heisman ballot today as a little bit of a gamble as who you think will still be the best player in the country, come the day after Selection Day, Travis Hunter. And it's pretty easy. I mean, that dude, he's legit on both sides. And the hit, stick in there. And someone told me that that Shedeur had said to him before they went back out for that play, I guess, or after whatever the most recent timeout was, told him, said, hey, get the ball. And he did. He's like able to call his shot almost.
Do that All-American thing. Yeah, but I think, and it comes back to what I said a second ago, which is, friends of ours in the national media, I hear them on Saturday night going, "Oh, now we got to do this Colorado thing again." What does that mean?
It means that Deion, as much as I like him and as good as he's been to us in our show, that sometimes it is difficult to gain access. Sometimes people try, and maybe there are individuals to whom there's a different meaning ascribed, but I think the people who take exception are the ones who have difficulty gaining the access they need in order to get the stories and reports they want. None of us are entitled to that, Ryan. You know that better than anybody. Both of you guys know it far better than I. But that's what it means to me generally. And because it's not just him. It's happened at Michigan under Harbaugh. It's happened, anybody that is difficult with the media, it's like anything else in life. If something's easier for you to do or more convenient for you to do, or there aren't unnecessary hurdles placed in your way, you would prefer to take the path where there aren't unnecessary hurdles. And at times, I think for some people, anecdotally, there are hurdles placed there when you're trying to cover them because they have, their own deal. That's their right. I've got no issue with that.
We should call him Coach Content because they go 4-8 last year, right? The TCU opener, unbelievable back and forth close game. Nebraska wasn't that close. Colorado State was like double overtime, ratings bonanza. They got blown out. Oregon, USC, another game that went to the final minute, 1-score game. Their win at Arizona State by a field goal. They blow the 29-point lead to Stanford, kind of a middling game against UCLA. Oregon State is another 1-score game where they bungled the end of the first half clock. Arizona, 3-point game. They got blown out at Washington State, and then they played a touchdown game against Utah. And then obviously you go this season and you have, was that the game of the year yesterday? Like, I don't know, it was the finish of the year, right? I don't think we've had a better finish than that. And the North Dakota State game was wildly entertaining. And they had Nebraska and Colorado State were fairly uneventful win and a loss. But my gosh, Coach Prime, like there's a really good chance that thing's going down in the last minute and something wild's going to happen. So, that's just a second league win in 2 years. But like for that, we've gotten a lot of entertainment. Like it has just been a wild ride with him.
Well, my hope, and this is what I was trying to get to, is that Travis Hunter isn't penalized when we get to December and it's time to actually turn the ballots in because of people's feelings about Prime. Listen, I did a feature for Game Day after week 1, and Coach Prime blew us off. That didn't make me feel any less about Travis Hunter because anyone who spends any time with him, and you guys know this, he's tremendous. And all that guy does is watch film, work out, take his online class, and go home. Like never doesn't go out. All the guys are like, let's go out. Let's go. No. That's all he's doing is ball and home life. And so I just hope that when we get to the end of the year, the record's going to be the record. They're going to be fighting to get into a mid-level bowl game at best. But I hope that people in general, the nation in general, particularly those who are making postseason award votes, don't let their feelings about the head coach, which is the only reason we know who he is anyway. But I hope their feelings about Prime doesn't alter, the ballots that are turned in for Travis Hunter, because I'm with you, Rece. If we're pressed to vote right now, he's the most outstanding college football player. I mean, that's not even a discussion. Now, he's not on a college football playoff team. He's not on a Big 12 championship team, but I don't think that should matter, but we all know that it does.
Who else would be in the top 3 right now? I've put no thought to this, just from the macro.
Who else would be in the top 3? Quinn Ewers for the Michigan game?
Maybe, but the first guy I would think it would be Cam Ward at Miami.
Yeah.
I think I would go Cam Ward, and third. I don't know who's third. Maybe Ewers for that one game.
Dart hasn't played anyone, but all he's doing is throwing for 700 yards a weekend, but so it'll sort itself out. But right now, Travis Hunter's number 1.
It'd be hard to imagine Dart's not in the conversation because the stats are going to be there,
Right.
I do have this for next week, and we won't spend a lot of time on Ole Miss here, but for the stats, Ole Miss is, and I'm not trying to take away from it because, as I've said about, like, let's say Indiana, it's not like they've played a murderer's row schedule, but they look crisp. They look good. They They look like a good football team. Ole Miss is clearly an excellent football team, but as it pertains to the numbers, their 3 FBS opponents, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, are 3 of the 6 worst defenses in the country. Now, the knee jerk early in the season said, well, you play Ole Miss, it hurts your stats. And that is true. But for one of their opponents, the Ole Miss game wasn't even their worst performance of the season in terms of yardage allowed. And for another one of the FBS opponents, Ole Miss wasn't the only team to hit them for 600 yards. So, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I've been a Dart fan since I saw him at USC. I think the guy's a really good player. I think Ole Miss is really good. I think they're a playoff team. I think they're a contender to win the SEC, even over Georgia or Texas. I think they can beat those teams. Need to see more. But the 700 yards a game or whatever it is, 80 points a game, whatever they're doing, is I think is augmented by the fact that they haven't seen a good defense at all. They will this week, but we've got time for that.
How about Ashton Jeanty and Jalen Milroe? Those would be my other 2. Jalen Milroe's going to put numbers up in that system, and Jeanty's been sensational.
And Alonzo Barnett III at James Madison, who clearly is the front runner now after what happened at Chapel Hill. Which, by the way, I interviewed that kid. He's awesome, but I had no idea. But yeah, we can talk about that. But yeah, I think he's on my ballot right now. He's not. He's going to be on Mac Brown's ballot.
Don't forget the guy Genty's going to have to deal with this week when they play Washington State. John McGee. They're undefeated. He's putting up big numbers too. So we've touched on a lot of guys there. Can you still win at a high rate in modern college football if you throw for 32 yards and throw 12 passes, run 46 times against a big brand name opponent? Apparently the answer to that is yes. If the opponent is USC and you are Michigan and you're playing in the big house. Before the Wolverines pulled it out, the Boo Birds came out there. They weren't happy with the way things were going. And then until happy, joy, break a couple runs and pull one out, at the expense of old SC there. Bullish on Michigan now, Pete, after that, or just looked like a survival game?
Well, you would have thought that there had been a little bit more resistance to the obvious game plan, right? Like that was, I think, the thing that surprised me. As sound as Daneland's defense looked against LSU, I was just a little bit surprised that it was, a defiant Big Ten. We are going to run the ball down your throat, and they were able to run the ball down their throat. I mean, no Colston Loveland, remember, and that's by far and away, skill-wise on the outside, Michigan's biggest threat, and there really isn't like a super close second. So, Samaj Morgan, I guess, would be the would be the next guy. He had 3 receptions for 6 yards, which might be the stat that sums this game up the best, and Alex Orji the best. I feel like this game for Michigan is cathartic, right? Because they're not like trying to dig out of a hole for the rest of the season. It sort of resets their playoff aspirations, quite frankly, and gives them something they lacked early in the season, which is an identity. They just did not have one, and now it is clear and linear how they are going to attempt to move the ball. I have some skepticism because the line is so green that this is going to work consistently in and out in that league. But give them credit, man. You gotta win those big games, and that comes down as just an epic victory for them.
Has anyone checked on Desmond Howard? Have you guys checked on Dez? Because that was one of my favorite moments of the year is the consolation. Are you going to be okay with this pick right here? Because it just kind of sums up where we all thought they were. But what do you do when you got questions at quarterback and you have a bunch of running backs? That's what you do. Lean on the backfield, and it's kind of football 101. But I'm worried about Dez. I worried about him from the moment he made the pick, but I want to make sure he was okay. Because everyone would remember that he picked him, and now everyone is going to remember that he didn't.
The Trojans walk away with a victory over Michigan.
Oh wow!
We okay? Like this, is like the first time ever he's picked against Michigan. First time ever. It's a big day.
Wow!
Because you're medication from
okay.
Time-honored game day psychological ploy, reverse psychology. Just go the reverse and say, "Oh, no shot here, no shot here. There's no way this is going to happen right there." So no, but it was a good moment, and we also had Pat picking, a road team, and right in front of a hostile crowd. And he's done it, but usually, I think the other time we were on the field and said he picked Ohio State against Michigan, but we weren't, out in the middle. So we had a couple of firsts. Pat was right, Desmond was wrong, but Desmond was delighted to be wrong.
Nico, for the first time in his collegiate playing career, is going to have to walk into an opposing stadium that's going to be packed out screaming, "Boomer! Boomer! Tennessee! Not today. Give me good Rocky Top. Rocky Top, Tennessee."
You think Dez is a paying customer at Michigan now? So that
if he got a little more agitated because he's gotten some tuition checks for his son.
That's a good point.
Yeah, he's Buddy Garrity now. He can't.
Changes your perspective when you're right.
He's invested.
Best in game to me, as great as Travis Hunter was for the whole game, the best moment in any game, BYU Kansas State. Kansas State coming apart like a $39 suit right at the end of the half. And then they punt to Parker Kingston, and he runs all over the state of Utah to track down the ball and then go back the other way.
Well, now the punt. And that one might have been touched, maybe. Scooped up by the return man, Parker Kingston, and now he's going to turn the corner. There he goes. Kingston to the 50. Still going. Kingston. Touchdown.
And then when they say leave it all on the field, Parker Kingston left it all on the field with that 90-yard punt return that really kind of sealed the deal to take Kansas State out, what turned out to be a 38-9 victory. If you haven't had your breakfast or your lunch or your dinner yet, or if you have an upset stomach, you might not want to watch all of the shenanigans toward the sidelines after that punt return by Kingston, because it took a lot out of him. Let's put it that way. But it was a scintillating moment on a wild night in Provo. That sort of one game early in the conference schedule of a league that I have deemed wide but not deep, meaning that everybody's pretty much in the same depth of the pool and can beat anybody on that night. That's not the last time somebody's going to run into a buzzsaw on the road in that league. And, but it does change the shape of things a little bit, changes things for Kansas State going forward with a loss, especially with the game they have coming up this week with Oklahoma State. But that was quite a punt return. Were you guys up and awake for that one?
Oh yeah, I saw that live. That was electric. I was home by then, and you're like, oh no,
yeah. That crowd looked just absolutely electric. I mean, what a night that looked like. And again, Rece, your wide but not deep statement comes true there. And if you look at Cincinnati this year, they had a rough transition to that league, right? UCF had a rough transition to that league. BYU had a rough transition to that league. Those three have really taken a leap. Like, I feel like they know what they need now. They could portal shop to the new league. That sometimes takes a little time, recruiting, etc. Houston, probably not in that category quite yet, but those three, give them credit. Like, you need to. There's no patience in college athletics anymore with the portal and immediate eligibility. You need to figure out a way to get good, and BYU did that without their two best tailbacks on Saturday night. They were dominant, and that was just like the most college football road game of all time, because Kansas State controlled the first 27 minutes of the first half.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you watch the game, you're like, oh, okay, like they're doing all right there, and then all of a sudden it was gone.
And I thought it was instructive. You saw Kleiman talking to Avery Johnson. You could almost read his lips. He was like, "You're okay. It's all right." Going to halftime, because they were in trouble, but they weren't out of it. Yeah, and then shortly thereafter they were when the second half came back.
Now, and how old school was it? I've said this my whole life. You guys know this. One of my favorite things growing up was you might go to a game or you watch a few games or whatever, and the best part was watching the WAC kickoff at 11 o'clock at night. On the West Coast, and it's Hawaii versus BYU or San Diego State and whoever, and BYU kicking off at home at roughly 10:45 Eastern with that crowd. It was so old school, but I'm so thankful that we've got Utah BYU back, on a regular basis. That game needs to be moved to Thanksgiving weekend. We can get into all that later, but the fact that game now is going to be played with about 3 or 4 games left in the regular season, and now, I mean, it could be for, the inside lane on the Big 12 title. I mean, it's just that game was already intense enough. But it's the most Big 12 thing ever, though, isn't it? We're all talking about, man, when we get to that Kansas State Oklahoma State game, and then they both lose. Now it's still a big game, but it's not, it's not the game we thought it was going to be. The Big 12 is the spaghetti pile of college football, and has been for a while now, and I'm here for that all the time.
Yeah, and that win at SMU looks a little better now that SMU hung double sixes, I believe, on TCU, right? Yeah. That shows, okay, well, they can clearly go into Dallas and stop them, and they're a dangerous team right now. And you look at it, they go Baylor on the road, Arizona at home. Suddenly, that Oklahoma State game on Friday, October 18th, could have some really big, Big 12 title implications to it, and they could get on a little bit of a roll here, especially if they get healthy.
Hey, by the way, we're asking each other, where did you watch this game and that game? Where did Sonny Dykes watch the end of the TCU?
I was just about to say the worst thing for SMU fans, Ryan, about that entire thing was that they didn't get to witness Sonny having to watch the rest of it. He left early. He was asked to leave early, and obviously Sonny, I'm sure most of our listeners are acutely aware of the fact that Sonny left, SMU and is coach at TCU now. So also a rough weekend for homestanding Oklahoma against McGee's alma mater, Tennessee. Tennessee was clearly the better team, tried a couple of times to give Oklahoma opportunities to get back in it, which Oklahoma immediately handed back. I don't know if I recall seeing turnover, give back first play, turnover, give back first play, especially the one that was on the 5 or 6 yard line, was particularly damaging. And this is what I alluded to at the top of the show about having an initial reaction and then finding out a little bit more. When Venables yanked Jackson Arnold and then kept him out of the game, I was like, man, you guys have invested everything in this guy. And as soon as trouble comes along, and there was some significant trouble, you pull him out of the game. You're okay with Dylan Gabriel leaving. Everything's about this guy, 5-star and very talented kid. Nothing's changed about that. He's having a rough half, and you're going to pull him, and you're not going to put him back. That was surprising to me, and I will admit that I questioned it. Now, there are two things that happened in the aftermath. One is that Venables alluded to the second turnover in which they ran an RPO and he misread it. That's fine. But then apparently the tag to it or the pass portion went to a place that they don't do. Okay, so now when that happens, it makes me say, okay, they recognize that the quarterback was completely rattled. He was out of the game plan. He's young, first experience. Tennessee's defensive front had gotten to him. So understandable that you did it. I also there was part of me, the old school part of me, that said, you don't have to tell everything you know. As a media guy, I appreciate the candor and the honesty, but then there's also the side that says, you don't have to tell everything, that was the reason why. Then the next portion of it comes in and I say, well, if fans, collectives, NIL, if they're going to invest the money in the guys, you wouldn't have any qualms about saying that about the, Indianapolis Colts quarterback or the Seattle Seahawks quarterback. So I was a little bit more okay with it. What what was the reaction when you guys saw Jackson Arnold get yanked and then not get put back in, and then hearing the aftermath of some of the rationale behind it?
Well, I'm always appreciative of insight, right? Because one of the things about covering football that we all have to acknowledge is we don't know what's happening on
every play, right? We can understand it's an RPO. We don't know the reads. We don't know everything going forward. So I appreciated just the forthrightness of that. And I think it was, Venables' moment of honesty. And I don't know if this was calculating, may just have been rooted in
it was just it sounded like it was just the truth.
Yes, he threw the ball backwards, and there's no backwards option. So we should be moving forwards, was basically the way I read it. So that hit me as, look, I'm never going to tell guys not to be interesting or not to be insightful. So, and I think we've evolved here, Rece, to where, it used to be don't criticize the kid, criticize the coach, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I just think we're beyond that now. I don't know how much money Jackson Arnold makes, and I don't really care, but if you are a SEC starting quarterback, you're probably in the neighborhood of seven figures. And if you're not performing and the coach wants to justify why he pulled you, please let us know. That's where I sat with that.
It sounded like an earnings call, right? All right, so this is your investment, and this is what happened. And it's interesting too, but we're talking about Tennessee, and last week obviously they had to add in the 10% to support these guys. And what I've talked about, I joke about Buddy Garrity all the time, right? But the reality is there's always been, and for you kids that don't know, this is the guy on Friday Night Lights that owned the car dealership and felt like he ran the program. And, every school has at least one Buddy Garrity, the guy in the Kodachrome, jacket with the gray hair that, think that whose name is on the building, thinks he runs everything. Now he officially runs everything, doesn't have to do it in the shadows. And now, in the case of Tennessee, and everyone else is going to end up doing this, you have 100,000 Buddy Garrity's. They're no longer voluntarily entering into these collectives. They're being forced. They're in the collective, right? This is part of their employee earnings share program. But this is also Venables. This is for years when Clemson would be in the college football playoff, and it was our only chance to really get a chance to talk to Brent extensively. He wasn't kept from the media, but he just now we got a one-on-one for a while, and he would share. I remember him sitting on the floor of the arena in Tampa, and halfway through him talking, I'm like, I can't believe he's telling us all this right now. But that's just how Brent operates, and it's how he's always operated. So it's going to be interesting, is anyone going to pull him aside and say, "Oh, I want to share all this," or would he be applauded for doing it? But yeah, you're exactly right. It feels very NFL press conference, and I have, again, I'm a Pete. I'm all for it because I need the quotes, but I need the information. But I'm going to be curious to see if anybody pulls him aside, or if he goes home and on the drive home he's thinking, maybe I shouldn't have ripped him as hard as I did, because in the heat of the moment,
I'm not sure I didn't take it as. I didn't think it was unfair ripping. I think it was sort of what I was trying to get across was that it was a different reaction from me. Not that it was wrong, just because I was like, wow, he actually told us the whole thing. You knew it was bad plays, but it looked like in the moment, it looked like a physical error that he threw the ball backwards and short hopped it. And then, if I understood his description right, that's not really where he needed to go. After he missed the one read, you can't do the second one too. And so, I also appreciated the honesty, found it very insightful. It changed my judgment of what I was questioning. I was like, you got to ride with this kid, let him play through it. But there are times when you get to the point, if you're making that type of mental error at that position, that maybe it is time to change. And it's really fascinating because the first thing everybody started talking about immediately afterwards, how's that game different if Dylan Gabriel's the quarterback at Oklahoma? Right. Now the quarterback at Oregon. Oregon doesn't care how that game would have been different. They're much more concerned with how they're going to fare with him. The other thing that happened is what happened. Were you said you talked to somebody? Did you go to the? No, you were at South Carolina. You didn't go to the James Madison, North Carolina game too, did you?
Oh, no. I just was, in fact, no, we watched the James Madison, North Carolina game at the airport bar in New Orleans and couldn't and couldn't believe what we were watching. No, and
like
obviously
a slot machine.
Yeah, no, and half of my between NC State, between App State's performance on Thursday night and NC State and North Carolina both on Saturday, it was a quick reminder that basketball season will be here soon in the Cardinal State.
Hey, don't forget about the Blue Devils.
Oh, I know. I knew you were going to say it. I knew you were going to. As the
Blue Devils.
The Jay Billis jersey over your shoulder, I swear, started vibrating as I was talking.
It's not even that. It's not even that one. It's that Duke number 50 baseball jersey that's around here someplace. Which, by the way, he made Dave Harding, who does the Duke broadcast and played football for Cut at Duke, sent me a picture a couple weeks ago of a campus bus. My son, mid-swing, was on the middle of the campus bus and the bus wrap. It's like, hey, that's pretty good. But also, mostly the reason I brought it up was not because of that, but because Duke and Carolina play this week. And the last time Mac had a defense as embarrassed as thoroughly, though that was a complete team meltdown, as thoroughly as JMU embarrassed them, he fired Manny Diaz after Taysom Hill ran for 790,000 yards against Texas in that BYU Texas game. And Manny has yet to get his revenge for any of this. Not implying that there's bad blood or anything. You always want the get back in sports.
Usually there is when you get fired.
I'm trying to soften it a little bit. There's some bad blood. I think we saw a little bit of bad blood in Norman with Josh Heupel.
Did you see Josh Heupel in the locker room afterwards, by the way?
I did. Yeah,
that was pretty. And I wanted to get this real quick, and then we'll get back to Chapel Hill. But I was, regardless of my alma mater, whatever, I think we start believing that the coach-player relationship doesn't matter as much as it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. But that moment right there was pretty genuine, and Josh kept it close to the vest. That's as emotional as he's ever going to get when he got choked up.
And let's just keep making us a better version every single day. You guys got me?
Yes, sir.
All right. This thing, coming back to normal, was never about me. It was not. But I appreciate you all having a little extra for me.
But the players genuinely, they knew the story. And talking to my people in the building, they said, we've been pulling them aside all week, going, coach isn't going to tell you what happened. This is what happened. And so I thought that was a genuine moment. But it was not the mood in the locker room in Chapel Hill.
It was, you know what? It was on the Tennessee thing. I talked to Iamaleava, I talked to Dylan Sampson, and I talked to Amari Thomas during the week, and all three of them, in varying forms, started to go there, and pulled back, and it was obvious that they knew the story and wanted to do something about it. And it was a good night for Josh, tough one for Oklahoma for sure, and tougher one still for Mac Brown, Jeff Collins. Although I know they had the punt block and they had a pick six, so it's not like all 70, but it's also not like James Madison didn't move the football either, So, I mean, that's a bad loss for Carolina, to the point that it's a program shaking loss. Right. And you start to wonder, okay, what's Mac going to do to fix it? Or is Mac at this point in his career legend, Hall of Famer, national champion, but is he the one to fix it? I know it's one loss, one game, things happen. 70 to James Madison with a new coach. It's not like this is Signetti, having built, coming off all these FCS championships, better, undefeated, trying to get into a New Year's Six bowl. It's not that. It's a lot of guys gone. It's new coach, and they come into your place and put 70 on you. And that's a tough loss.
They lost 10 of their best 11 players to Indiana.
Yeah.
So again, they brought in some other guys and everything like that. But yeah, I did not expect James Madison to be like a Sun Belt contender this year. They just lost too much. Like, it's just hard in modern college football to overcome at that level, like massive, departures. And so give Bob Chesney a lot of credit. Look, Bob Chesney has been around for a long time. He's a Northeast guy up here, so I've run across him. I've run across him a bunch.
He started his career as a head coach at Salve Regina in Newport. He then went to Assumption, where Brian Kelly played, and then he went to Holy Cross. So that's a guy who learned how to win football games, and he's actually a special teams guru. That's his background. So the block punt was not surprising. Their play caller is like 32 years old, Dean Kennedy. Had to feel pretty good to roll into Chapel Hill and turn the scoreboard into 3-7s the other night for James Madison. So good for them, man. And look, Mac Brown basically told his team he's pondering quitting. And then after the game, he said he's not going to quit. But like they literally went to Chapel Hill and shook the foundation of the Carolina program to its core. That's a wild, wild victory. And that's why college football is the best, because you just have no idea where the earthquakes are coming on Saturday.
P, you know the deal. You get lucky, right? I wrote a story Friday for ESPN.com about flopping. And it was a tongue-in-cheek story. I talked to a Hollywood stunt coordinator and some wrestlers, but it was all spurred by Alonzo Barnett III, the quarterback, who's from North Carolina, by the way. He had that ridiculous, like double flip, offensive lineman performance CPR and all that stuff. Well, that also was in a game where they only beat Charlotte by a couple scores. They beat Gardner-Webb by a touchdown.
Yeah.
They scored 13 points against Gardner-Webb and then hung 70 on North Carolina. So it's just there are losses. This is talking about Brent Venables, how Brent Venables ended up at Clemson. There are nights and days. That's how Josh Heupel, departed Arkansas or Oklahoma, was after a terrible bowl game. There are days that you look back and you go, that's the day we did the clean slate protocol. And that just feels like, whether it's now or whether it's in December, but this is Chapel Hill football, man. I grew up here. This is how this works. There's a list of I just saw UCLA in person at LSU. There's a list of programs for 150 years. How can they not be better at this? And North Carolina has always been, if not at the top of the list, in the top 5.
Yeah. Don't worry. Hubert's going to get the boys going. As I leave you, I will leave you with creative play calling 101. Not that it would have changed my thing, but I hadn't reached out to Navy offensive coordinator Drew Cronick in quite some time. He was head coach at Lenoir-Rhyne, head coach at Mercer, and I first met him when he was the head coach at Lenoir-Rhyne, and I was in Hickory, North Carolina for a speaking engagement several years ago. Cool. So when I was pondering, I had the big bagel, awful Superdog pick, couldn't even get close. I was behind like 52-0 at halftime on all these Superdogs I'm picking. I sort of like Navy. They're running this, what he calls millennial wing tee with a little option in there. I'm thinking, Memphis coming off this win. They haven't seen a lot of the new stuff. Maybe I'll go there. So I text Cronick and I say, hey, how's preparation gone this week, or some, relatively generic question. How you guys feeling about Saturday? Nothing. Ghost, nothing. Get nothing. Pick it as Superdog. It comes home after some fits and starts and some anxious moments with Memphis recovering its own onside kick at the end after rallying from 19 down in the fourth quarter. And Navy pulls it out. Gets me on the board. I'm sitting there watching games on Saturday night, and phone pops up. Drew Cronick. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, so now you're going to answer. But the text was hilarious. He said, hey, man, sorry I didn't get back to you. I didn't believe it was really you. Thought it was some Memphis fan messing with me trying to get information. And he said, and then I heard you give us some love this morning on game day and thought, I guess it was him. So anyway, never know, right? So
that's right.
Memphis operative Rece Davis.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
It. Notorious spy. There's going to be a Netflix documentary any minute. Rece Davis.
Me spying for Silverfield.
me and Connor Stallions. We can get it done. Guys, this was fun. Great weekend of college football. Appreciate you doing it. Appreciate all of you listening and watching on YouTube. We ask you to subscribe to the College Game Day Podcast or download this wherever you prefer to get your podcast.